class is beginning. And okay, thank you. So yeah, any nation or any human being become, they become great. uh, how to identify that? The people, those who are endowed with great wisdom or great knowledge, or even real rich people, they all start becoming a giver. They start giving. If you have uh, sufficient wealth or sufficient wisdom, or more than enough, anybody or any nation, they become a giver. They start imparting their wisdom to neighboring people. That is how you know they become great. So that is one of the identification of greatness. A person who is self-centered, or has, or a nation who has kept all the riches and all the things within themselves, would not identify it as a great nation. So India became great because it became a giver. Nowadays we are not, we are not categorized under developed nation. We are still developing under that category. But in ancient time, everybody looked upon India with huge respect, because it was India who was imparting the riches and the wisdom and all the things. So people, scholars from India were invited to different countries, which included China, which included Japan, which included various people, and kings would offer their even life. There is a story in Tibet, that once a king was captured by another king, and the king, another Tibetan king, because they used to fight like other kings. So the other king, who was conqueror, asked for a huge money to release that another king from the the king's son. And what king said, that I'm already old, I'm about to die, within maybe 5 6 years I'll die. You rather spending that money on me and releasing me, you spend that money and invite a scholar from India, and let him come to our land and our kingdom, and let him give the teaching. So the king actually sacrificed his life just to get a scholar from India. So you can imagine how big and how great the Indian heritage used to be in ancient time. And here is in the previous class I gave you a kind of a homework to just to watch this documentary, Hindu deities worshipped in Japan. And for the glimpses students, uh, I'll share it again, triple E students. So here is a quotation from a former ambassador of China. He says, India conquered and dominated China culturally for 20 centuries, so almost 2000 years, without ever having to send a single soldier across her border. So it was, India, if you go to China or Japan, the people, they themselves might be not aware that they are worshipping Indian gods, and they are following Indian calendar system or Indian culture. But inherently, that is what is the truth. That is the fact. And through these learnings and these discussions and these courses, just we are getting ourselves to know, and also will make others, when we grow up as a bureaucrat or a technocrat, we might be visiting many places, or even we just to be, make ourselves aware that India has contributed these greatness to contribute these great things to different people, to different countries, to different civilizations. So this is very important, and as he said, pointed out in the previous class, that this can be used as to develop a diplomatic relationship with other countries and with other people. Even as a software engineer, suppose, or any engineer traveling to China or Japan, or for that matter, United States of America, uh, they all have a huge respect for Indian system, Indian culture, Indian spiritual traditions. There is a survey in America, United States, that out of every 4 out of 1, almost 25% of American, they follow one or other Indian spiritual practices. Either they are doing yoga, they are following Buddhism, they are doing some sort of spiritual practice which has its roots in India. So this is a data, a fact. uh, you know so India has dominated culturally and is dominating culturally, and this is one of the most important, our core competence, which we can use apart from other worldly developments like technology and sciences. We need to be aware ourselves, and to make others also aware that this is one of our core competence. So do watch this. I think most of you have watched the film. Is there any question related to the film? Anything which you want to ask? This is open. The floor is open for questions. Anybody, if somebody wants to ask if they have watched the documentary. Okay. In another class where I was teaching, one student asked me a very important question. The question was, sir, although these deities, they look, no, they are Indian in origin, but they do not look like Indian deities the way we worship, say, Agni, or say Brahma or Indra or whatever we see in our temples. These deities, their names are just Indian. They do not look like Indian deities. What is the reason? Can somebody tell me? Let me ask, some students from this class. Let that what, what.
Sir, I think it is due to their environment and cultural practices that are already existed in Japan, that the sculptures must have been changed, or they may have influenced these.
Exactly. Very, very, very correct answer. Thank you. Thank you, Aziz. Azizur Rahman. Very correctly what Azizur Rahman has pointed out. Any culture, any tradition, it needs to make sense to the people where it is going to. In other words, it needs to be contextualized. We need to put into certain context. Then only in that cultural context only those deities or those practices, those tradition will make sense. So Indian tradition, wherever it went, was not dogmatic in nature. It never said that no, the facial features of the deity should be only in the mode of Indian people. No, facial features of these Indian deities have got in a Japanese way, all the eyes, and they have got this Mongoloid features, and this is perfectly fine because it's for the Japanese people, they are worshipping. So let them contextualize these texts, these traditions, these deities in their own way. And this contextualization has happened in India also. We'll discuss some of the case study today, how it has happened in India, because India is also a very vast nation. The culture which exists in, say, Tamil Nadu is quite different from the culture which exists in Kashmir. Geographical conditions are quite different. Kashmir, it's all 24 months, it's the whole, it's a winter season. In say Kerala, it's all 12 months, it's a summer season. People, the way their features, their customs, their tradition, it's quite different, very much different from, say, for Kerala or Tamil Nadu to Kashmir. But culturally, we are the same people. We all are Indian. So there has been an underlying thread. There has been one undercurrent. The cultural union has been there since ancient time, and we'll look how how this cultural union was done in ancient time. In fact, for that matter, when Islam arrived in India, the cultural tradition got tremendous. It has got a tremendous change. For example, if we say in very strict, in a dogmatic manner, in Islamic traditions of Arab, not Persian, I'm talking about Arab, where it originated. Music was, to some extent, the music was prohibited. People in Islam, the music as a moshiki, it is called, it has got some prohibition. But if you come to India, the whole Sufi tradition has got qawwals. You to go to different mazars and different Sufi shrines, you'll find people celebrating with these music festivals in form of qawwali, and they are praying the Allah through their music, which in a very dogmatic sense, which is prohibited in the say Arab version of Islam. But in India, again, it has got contextualized. So these thing was unique to India, where things got contextualized according to different tradition, different culture, different people. And that is why we celebrate our diversity. India is united through its diversity. Diversity is very much encouraged. It's not, if you go to a garden where you will find only roses, in the whole, you go to this garden, that corner of that garden, only roses you will find. And there is another garden where you will have jasmine, some roses, some dahlia, some other flowers. Which garden would you prefer? Let me ask Karan P. Sorry, Kiran. Kiran P.
No, it's roses, sir.
Huh?
Roses.
No, I'm asking, there are two gardens, Kiran.
Yes.
Suppose there is one garden where you will find only roses. And if you go to another garden where you will find roses and some dahlias, some jasmine in the garden, which garden would you prefer?
Of course, the mixture of diversity, sir.
Mixture of diversity, yes. So similarly, if any country, has got it's a diverse culture, which has some influences from other sides and some its indigenous influence. This diversity is, or even for that matter, if only one sort of spiritual tradition is there, say I go to, I go to Rohan, and he's sitting like a Gautama Buddha, he's meditating. If I go to Meghna, she's also sitting. Kiran is also sitting. So everybody is just meditating or has become very much, pious and very much, spiritual person. The society will become so, filled with boredom. So, even in fact, in Indian tradition, even the certain, to some extent, the evil is also accepted. If in our class, if there is no everybody is so behaving so properly, there is not a single person who is not mischievous, the class will slightly become boring, isn't it? No, of course, I'm not encouraging that people should start creating nuances and start disturbing the class or the society, for that matter. But to some extent, we need to be tolerant to even the people, those who are doing some, mischievous activity, because it is bound to happen. We cannot expect everybody to become a perfect human being like Gautama the Buddha or like Maryada Purushottam Ram. Everybody, we cannot expect to behave, in a 100% perfect way. Of course, we all need to, we need to have this pursuit for perfection, but that's a utopian concept, ideal concept, which is not going to become a reality. So we need to keep these things in mind, that things are bound to happen. Some, it's a big country, some mischievous people will be there, and they will create some disturbances. We should not, encourage those things, of course. But in our mind, that should be there. Anyway, so this diversity is very much encouraged in Indian context, and that is why, even these deities, when they went to different, countries, they got contextualized in their own tradition. So that's what was answered. It's correct. Now, here is another quotation from Swami Vivekananda. What he's saying: civilizations have arisen in other parts of the world. In ancient and modern times, wonderful ideas have been carried forward from one race to another. But mark you, my friends, it has been always with the blast of war trumpets and the march of embattled cohorts. So it was, kind of a conquer through sword. Majority of religions also, they have conquered through sword. Each idea to be soaked in a dirge of blood. Each word of power has to be followed by the groans of millions, by the wails of orphans, by the tears of widows. This many other nations have taught. So this is what, if you read the crusade of wars of Christian era or the Islamic invasion in medieval time periods, this is kind of a bloody history we will come across. Some fights were happening in ancient India too, but we'll discuss that. Those fights were not, a kind of a war crusade for the religion or for the money. It was a different context. And please feel free to point, out if some discussions are there or you have some confusion. Let me, just point out that, this is confusing. For example, in India, when wars used to happen, it was not a war, like a kind of the way invasion was happening from other parts of world to India. So how the invasion in within the, when two say two kings are fighting within the Indian territories, say Pallavas attacking the Tamil. I'm taking just one imagined case history of Pallavas attacking the say Odisha, king of Odisha. So the ordinary people, the villagers and the civilians were not attacked. It was a war between only the armies. Army will fight. All the temples and other people and other people's house, they will not at all disturb. And the kings will, the king, defeated king will become a subordinate to the conquered king. It was not kind of a looting the way it used to happen from when the invasion was happening from the outside country. The conqueror will just loot everything and go away to its own country. In fact, in later on, when Mughals started ruling India, they also became part of India. They did not, unlike Delhi Sultanate and other invaders, those who looted India and left the country, Mughals became part of India. They contributed to the rich Indian civilization. Do remember that. They have contributed. They became part of India. They have built Taj Mahal and they built Red Fort and other things. And they contributed to the richness and the growth of the whole Indian country. So because they got settled down. But there was a difference when invasion was happening in earlier time period, when the invaders were just looting and leaving away the country in a very devastated state. So Swami Vivekananda is talking about that. that this many other nations have taught uh, this many other nations have taught this kind of a war, and but India for thousands of years peacefully existed. Here activity prevailed when even Greece did not exist. Now Greek and Egyptians, all these ancient civilizations, when they were no more not into existent, India was, on its peak of its culture and other developments. Even earlier, when history has no record, the tradition dares not to peer into the gloom of the intense past. Even from until now, ideas after ideas have marched out from her. Her means India, the nation. But every word has been spoken with a blessing behind it and peace before it. We, of all nations of the world, have never been conquering race. And that blessing is our head, and therefore we live. So this is a statement from Swami Vivekananda. Let us come to another statement from two greatest mind of the world from the science. Here there is Albert Einstein and there is a Heisenberg, Werner Heisenberg. Both are Nobel laureates. Both were Nobel laureates. Great physicist of contemporary times. I suppose you all know these two figures already. So this is Albert Einstein. He wrote to Heisenberg. This is in the records, and Albert Einstein is writing to Heisenberg, and this is, I'm quoting Albert Einstein. He's saying, in the West, we have built a beautiful ship, and it has got all the comforts in it, but one thing that it does not have is a compass. Here Albert Einstein is highlighting about the Western development. He's comparing the science and technological developments and other advancements of West, as a comfort, comforts of the ship. So he's taking analogy, one example. He's taking this ship as a metaphor of Western world. So he's saying that the ship has got all the comforts in it, but one thing it does not have, it has not got the compass. And that is why it does not know where it is going. So all this advancement, technological advancement and worldly advancement is taking us to some, what to say, there's no direction into this, development of scientific advantage. For example, this great scientist who passed away last year, this physicist, what is his name? Can somebody remind me? He was paralyzed and he used to remain on wheelchair. What is his name?
Stephen Hawking, sir.
Stephen Hawking.
Yes,
Hawking,
Stephen
sir.
Hawking. So Stephen Hawking, he said that the Earth won't be, after 200 years, the way we are exploiting our natural resources, the Earth won't be a fit place to survive for human races. The way we are polluting, the way the air pollution and water pollution and other things are happening, the Earth won't be fit a place to survive for human beings. So we need to plan to shift to some other planet. So this is what in other sense Albert Einstein is also pointing out, that this technological advancement, we do not know where the ship is going, with all exploiting natural resources for our own comfort, for our benefits, just for human centric. We have become so much human oriented. And this is another difference. If you in biblical tradition, the God has created everything for human beings enjoyment. This, but in Indian context, do remember that even the sentient and non-sentient being, even the non-living beings are also part of this uh, uh, divinity, the divine manifestation of God. In Ramcharitmanas, Tulasidas, great saint, he has said this: "Jad ke tanjag jeev jata sakal Ram mein jaan." I see all these sentient and non-sentient beings pervading with the existence of my Lord Ram. Now he's not just pointing to Ram as a king from Ayodhya. He's seeing entire manifestation of worldly existence. in the form of this divine figure Ram. He's very clearly saying that Jad Ketan, Jad means inert things, those who are non-sentient things. Like example for rivers and waters and the hills and mountains. He's saying they all are pervading with my Ram, my. So this is another difference that we should, respect. That is why we worship our rivers and trees and other natural resources. For ordinary being, just you put the divinity in the trees or the rivers, they will fear to pollute it. They will feel scared. No, this I'll great sin will incur. I'll go to hell if I pollute the river. So this is how Indian mind were trained in ancient time. Everybody, we cannot give cultural education class like now right now the way we are providing. We cannot impart these things. So it became part of Indian culture itself. So this is what Albert Einstein is saying, that this does not know where to go, where it is going. And in the East, in the East, including the whole Eastern, wherever this sort of culture and ideas were pervading. So he's saying in the East, people like Tagore and Gandhi and their spiritual forebearers have found this compass. So why not this compass is put into the ship so that both can realize their purpose? So this technological advancement, which is a directionless, and now this is the Western, world. We have this spiritual, compass, a guidance sort of thing. So people from all over the world, nobody comes to India to study for say and communication engineering. Maybe some exceptions might be there, but you won't in universities people from America or from UK, United Kingdom or European countries. They are there to study these, electronics and communication or electrical engineering for that matter. But there are hundreds and thousands of people since ancient time. They have come to study, say, they have come to study, learn yoga. They have come to study philosophy. They have come to learn advancement. They have come to learn Sanskrit. So this combination of East and West, this is very much needed in our contemporary times. What we can impart to them, we need to become a giver always. As I have been saying, there was a great historian, art, in fact, his name was Anand Kumaraswamy. He used to say this often, that the world has a global village. This art historian was a Tamil Indian in Sri Lanka, brought up in United States and UK. He passed away long back in 20th century, early 20th century. So he used to say this. In that time, almost 100 years from now, this. He's saying that the world has become a global village now. And every civilization is contributing something to it. And he says that, but we Indians do this empty-handed. He gives a metaphor that there is a big cauldron. Cauldron means pot. Cauldron, and every civilization is putting something into this cauldron. But we Indians are coming empty-handed, not because we do not have anything to offer, but we do not offer. So in development, of course, we are somewhat lagging behind, but the spiritual domain and in the these sorts of things, we have already, we have our core competence. So this sort of combination of Eastern and Western, should be combined together in the contemporary times. This is what is being pointed out by these two great minds of our times. And it's water to everybody. No, this is a Rig Ved saying, Ano Bhadra Kratavo Yantu Vishwata. What is in the Vishwa, whatever is in the entire world, if it is auspicious, if it is Bhadra, Bhadra means auspicious, let it come from all the directions. So this is how India has survived. This is the reason for the existence of India. In French, it is called raison d'être. It means reason for its existence. as I said, we keep celebrating our diversity. Now, here there is a sorry, there was a great Urdu poet. His name was Allama Iqbal. Iqbal wrote "सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा." Now, "सारे जहां" from all the other words, all the countries, Hindustan हमारा, our India is great. Now he, in that poem, he has mentioned this very important line, which says, "यूनान मिस्र रोमा मिट गए सब जहां से." Yunan is Greek, Misr is Egypt, Rome is Romans. So all these civilization, if you go at present, Greek civilization where it exists, you'll find it in only in museums. You know, Egyptian civilization it exists in museum. Roman civilization it exists in museum and in the monuments. It's not a living civilization, but India civilization, he says that कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी. No, there is some reason, there is some element in us why we have survived. सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जहां हमारा. For many centuries people have attacked us and invaded us. We have not invaded others, but people have invaded us, but still we were able to survive till date. So why we have survived till date? How this you go to ancient most the civilization like Indus Valley civilization, the same Shiva is being worshipped there and the same Shiva is still there. You won't find Roman deities being worshipped in contemporary times. Those were not those, or Egyptian deities being worshipped in contemporary times in Egypt. They all exist only in museums, but our things are surviving. So what is the reason? So we'll explore that. Also, we need to have certain conviction for our own great heritage. Here there is a quotation from Jawaharlal Nehru. It is from Discovery of India. You can find it on page number 50. He's telling us that how we are not aware of our great achievements and developments. He's saying that India was in my blood and there was much in her that yet I approached her almost like an alien critique. When we were young people, and if somebody's playing Indian classical music, we'll say, "Oh, look, these old-fashioned people." We like to listen to these all Bryan Adams and rock music. This classical music, who listens to it? It's just a wastage of time and how boring it is. And we felt proud in it, just disparaging our own classical music and praising the Western music. That was I was also part of this when I was a young person. So we like to sometimes, we do not feel respect when we speak our own native languages. We say this is language of only, common, say, laborers and other people. This is the fact I'm telling you, including me. I'm also including. I'm just not just blaming others. I'm also including. We just start, we become a kind of alien critique. This is what he's also pointing out. He's saying, full of dislike for the present as well as many relics of the past that I saw. So relics of past, what Jawaharlal Nehru meaning like caste system, and these, there are these are relics of past, and we start, just blindly when we do not get to know that okay, what was the actual reason behind all these things, we just blindly we become alien critique. So he's saying this. Yet I approached to her. Her means here Mother India, to India, almost like an alien critique, full of dislike for the present, and as well as for many of the relics of the past that I saw. To some extent, I came to her via the West. Now, we all are coming to our own country via the West. Our medium of instruction is English, which is not our own language. So, to majority of things, we are coming to us. When some Western people praises about India, oh, India was great. Then also we say, oh, okay, India was great. When Swami Vivekananda went to Chicago and he spoke in the World Religion of Conference, he became a big figure. Nobody respected him in India. He was ordinary, wandering monk. People abused him like a beggar. When yoga, nobody did yoga. When it went to Western world and it became yoga, you know, so everybody started doing yoga. It's a yoga. But only when it became yoga, that means the Western people, when they start appreciating, we just follow them blindly. So this is the unfortunate thing. And we do not feel pride in taking our own, our own tradition and culture. This is a fact. And I'm not blaming everybody, or I'm not, this is what I feel. I'm not saying that, okay, you might also, you are forced to feel in a similar way. This is what I feel. So here Pandit Nehru is saying again, to some extent I came to her via the West and looked up at her as a friendly Westerner might have done. I was eager and anxious to change her outlook and appearance and give her the garb of modernity. So we all want to become modern people. So Pandit Nehru, he made tremendous effort to make India a modern nation, and he achieved to some extent. All these great IITs and other things were his efforts. But he's questioning himself. Yet doubt arose within me. Did I know India? I who presumed to scrap much of her past heritage. So look, this great scholar and great person, he is questioning himself. Did I know India? I who presume to scrap much of her past heritage. So we should also question ourselves. Do we know actually what India is? There is another great European scholar from Germany. He said, in the modern planetary situation, Eastern and Western culture can no longer meet one other as equal partners. They meet in westernized world under the conditions shaped by Western ways of thinking. And here Mahatma Gandhi is making a very profound and very important statement. He's saying, I want all the culture from all the lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible. He's saying, let the windows of my house open and let all the winds from all other cultures and all other countries, but I refuse to be blown off my feet by any. No, unless the strong foundation about our own system and our own tradition, our own culture is there, our feet is definitely going to be blown off by these winds. So many great traditions we have lost it. Just 5-6 years back, I was part of STICMAKE, this cultural organization, and I used to interact with a great Rudra Veena player. Rudra Veena is a veena which is believed to be made by the Lord Shiva himself. And the last exponent of it was Ustad Asad Ali Khan, a great master of this Rudra Veena. I was fortunate enough to thanks to STICMAKE, I was fortunate enough to sit with him and interact with him. And when he passed away, I got to know that he was the last exponent. This Rudra Veena has developed from 2000 years. There is a long history of 2000 years, and he was the last exponent. Now, your generation people are not going to listen to that particular style which he played, Rudra Veena, Khandarwani. Veena is of course existing, but that particular form which he played, no more surviving. So it's very unfortunate. Many great traditions have already vanished. Such great tradition which has tremendous history, because we do not, first of all, we are not aware of it. Second, we do not have a respect for it. It's unfortunate. So I'll just I think how much time is left, or can somebody
3 minutes.
can somebody tell me how much time is?
3 minutes. It ends at 10:20.
Okay, so I think 2-3 minutes are left. So then we'll enter into other direction in the discussions in the next class. I will not enter into the new topic, or maybe I'll very quickly introduce that, and we'll discuss in more elaborated manner in the next class, that saints from South Indian states, they have contributed, these 4 states, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, they have contributed to integrate India in a big manner. And if you go to, Adi Shankara from Kerala, Ramanujacharya from Tamil Nadu, Madhvacharya from Karnataka, Vallabhacharya from Andhra and Telangana. If you go to Badrinath, you go to Kedarnath, you go to Nath Dwara in Rajasthan. If you go to even from Bhutan, if you go to Bhutan, this Guru Rinpoche, who is Padmasambhava, went from Kanchi, and the Pashupatinath temple in in Kathmandu, all these have very deep connection with South India. And people, these four great saints, their tradition is surviving in any of the ancient temple. If you go to whole of the Asian subcontinent, if there is any temple, and if there is ancient temple, it has to be history of more than 400 years, and if it is that ancient, it has to be got connected with either of these four, these four people, and they belong to South India. And this all happened through, cultural integration was happening through these, and it was just not the tradition, but also the South Indian culture which went to all these far off places, to Himalayan lands, to Tibet, to many places. So we'll discuss these things into the next class. So I think we'll call it a day. It's any question, any doubt is there, just you can ask it now.
Excuse me, sir. I have a small
Yes.
doubt. In the documentary that you asked us to watch, now, sir,
Yes.
when I was watching, there was a particular mention by that Japanese person that the traditions of India, like all the cultural traditions and religious practices, are practiced within Japan, but India has lost them. He made that was a kind of bold statement that he made, sir. So is it
Yes.
true? Is that correct or like?
Yes, to some tradition we have lost it. For example, the whole Buddhist tradition, which is very strongly being practiced in Japan, we have lost it in India. We'll discuss maybe in the next class how rich it was in the whole southern Indian state. The Pallava king from Tamil Nadu is a Buddhist person who is going and spreading the whole Bodhidharma, the Zen tradition in Japan and in China. But do we have that tradition surviving in Tamil Nadu at present?
No,
No,
sir.
no, we do not. So we have lost many of, in fact, all these Vedic, ancient Vedic traditions, which is still there in Japan, the worship of Agni and Varun. And do we have temples of Indra and Agni in independent temples? I mean, in India we do not have. So we have lost it because of various reasons. Our own negligence, some external invasions, uh, unawareness, all these have, because yes, that's true, we have lost it. And what he's pointing out is sad but true.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, what was the documentary again? Can you?
Okay, I have already posted it in your class chat box. Are you a student of EC or student of?
EC, sir.
Okay, if you are EC, you should be aware. I'll be keep posting
Okay, sir.
certain things
Okay, sir.
through your chat box. You should, it's. I've already posted after the previous class, so it's there. You just click the link and watch it.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
So actually, then it's true that Buddhism is very popular but actually, from what I heard, they actually cut off their country from the external countries and all for about 3,000 years or something. So,
Who cut off?
Japan.
Okay.
So actually, mm, and then they developed their own versions of all the Buddhism and all, which is now known with the name Shintoism or something.
Yes, that's true. That is bound to happen. Even for a few hundred, India was also cut off from rest of the country. Uh, that's bound to happen. But what the documentary is trying to point out, that all these traditions which went from India, they have developed in their own contextual way. So they developed this Shintoism, which is actually a mantra form. They recite mantra. The whole Shinto Buddhism is actually the mantra form. They recite certain mantras, and those mantras are actually the Sanskrit mantras. Somewhat got transformed into Japanese, languages. But originally they belong to the Indian. Their roots are Indian. So uh, uh, that is quite natural to happen, that any country will, when it is developing its own indigenous traditions, and it is taking certain things from outside element, it will become amalgamation, a kind of mixture of those things, and a unique thing will develop. So that is bound to happen. That is true, what you said in the context of Japan also, and it is true for any for that matter, for any country.
Okay, sir.
So any other questions? Okay, if there are none, then we will close the discussions here. We'll call it a day. I'm taking the attendance. You can leave the meeting now.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Stop recording.
Sir, please stop the recording, sir.
Thank